Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Well, the other day I did an encounter from a user by the name of Snathius, and in their case they talked about one of their family members encountering a strange bird man over at an area called Lake Choke Canyon. Well, lo and behold, this same user actually now has another encounter, this one that happened to another set of family members, but this one were their great-grandparents, and in this case it sounds like they had a visitation from the infamous and evil Goatman. So very fascinating stuff when I was reading this info, and I thought I would share it for you here. Once again, it comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Humanoid Encounters, and this richly detailed story is titled, "From that night onward, he always kept a loaded shotgun and a pistol in the truck 1960s. So let's go ahead and let's share this encounter here. I'll give my own thoughts and opinions, and then let me know what you guys and gals think. So here's what they state. This one happened to my great-grandparents on my father's mother's side. They lived on their small cattle and livestock ranch there in Christine, Texas, for the later decades of their lives. Christine is a super small town where everyone knows everyone, and there's no need to lock your doors when you leave or when you go to bed. My great-grandparents were the warmest people you'd ever meet, always smiling, sharing humorous stories with friends and family. They'd take your coats or jackets when you'd enter their warm home, and before hanging them up on their coat rack, they'd sneak a $20 bill into your pocket for you to find later. They were the kind of older couple who were always poking harmless jokes at each other in front of company to entertain you, super charming and loving, and always smiling and loving the life that they built for themselves. Visiting them was always a treat because I grew up in the city, and when we would visit on a weekend, my great-grandfather would take my younger brother and I around the ranch to see the animals and livestock, pet the horses, feed the goats, and then throw rocks into the stock pond. When we'd return to their house from seeing the ranch, my great-grandmother would have our favorite, breakfast for dinner on the table, which consisted of fresh hash browns, farm-raised bacon and ham, homemade tortillas, mild and spicy salsas, and fried eggs. And coffee, always with coffee, even if it was dinner time, and we loved it. So this story takes place around the 1960s, not exactly sure on the year, but my great-grandparents were in their late 50s, and their children, my grandmother, were all grown and had gotten married and moved out. So at this point, it was just the two of them living on the ranch. They were on their way home from visiting some family in the south side of San Antonio, which was about 70 miles away. They had lost track of time, so it was late in the evening when they left. So they're driving back home to their ranch near Christine, Texas, and on their route, they have to drive over this wooden bridge that extends over a deep creek. I think sometime actually in the 1980s, a better road was paved into the town that no longer made it necessary to have to take the small dirt road and bridge from the Highway 16 to their small ranch. Several years ago, that wooden bridge was torn down and a new bridge was built using steel and concrete. Spanish moss hangs from the trees, which really makes it creepy. And from what I remember, this bridge is about 80 feet long from end to end due to the creek it expands over being relatively wide. And underneath the bridge is a good 30 to 40 foot drop down to the creek bed. For the most part, the creek is dry year-round and only sees water flows after rainstorms. As my great-grandparents are driving over this wooden bridge, their truck suddenly dies and comes to a stop near the middle of the bridge. My great-grandfather starts swearing up a storm because he's tired, it's late, and they're still about 10 miles from home. He maintains his truck better than most, and they had a full tank of gas. Even the headlights and cabin lights were shut off, so they were stuck there with only the moon bathing them and their surroundings in soft moonlight. Now, my great-grandfather was born in the brush country of South Texas, so there's not much he hasn't seen out there. And in a situation, while most people might be a little intimidated to leave the safety of their vehicle, my great-grandfather was in his element out at night in what is essentially his backyard. Thinking it has to be a battery connection that came loose, my great-grandfather asks great-grandmother to hang tight, pops the hood and opens his door, stepping out into the cool night to check under the hood and hope to diagnose the issue. As he's struggling to see, fumbling with the battery connections under the hood, Behind him, he hears the sound of clip-clops on the wooden bridge. It sounded like steps of a hoofed animal approaching him from behind. And so he turns around and lets his eyes adjust to the dim moonlight to see what's making that noise. Maybe it's a deer or a cow or a goat that's gotten loose from one of the other ranches in the area. And so squinting, he's looking down on the bridge and sees what appears to be a thin man, about 5.5 feet tall, but with a set of very large ram horns on his head, walking upright, approaching him from the opposite end of the bridge. Its hoofed feet were clip-clopping on the wooden bridge as it's steadily trotting towards him. Now, a cold chill ran up my grandfather's spine, and he quickly shut the trunk hood and then hops back into the driver's seat, slamming shut the door behind him and then locking it. My great-grandmother, confused by his sudden reactions, asks what's going on, and my great-grandfather points at the humanoid that is slowly approaching their vehicle. She sees it and reacts with a "what the hell is that? A goat?" watching it approach them and their vehicle. They can see that the horns on its head are very large, much larger than any ram or goat they've ever seen, but still cannot make out whether it has a ram or a goat's head or even a human's head. It's about 20 feet from the front of their truck when it hunches over and begins walking on all four of its cloven feet. They can only vaguely make out its features as it reaches their vehicle and begins circling them, my great-grandparents twisting and turning in their seats to watch as it's bobbing its head up and down, pacing around their truck. It doesn't ever touch the truck. It only slowly saunters around their vehicle, with the only sound in the night being its hooves clipping and clomping on the wooden bridge. Though it was dark and difficult to make out its exact features, they both agreed that it had the body of a skinny, bony man, but with the head of a goat. They both said that the creepiest part of the encounter was watching its large horns bobble around the front and the rear of the truck, unsure if it was going to do anything to them, and how it felt like an evil or demonic entity, that they could sense it not being a normal animal, but a creature with evil intent. And so they hold their breath and don't know what to do, and my great-grandmother, being very Catholic, begins praying quietly under her breath. On its fifth or sixth time walking around their truck, it stands back up on its hind legs and meanders towards the opposite end of the bridge from which it came, eventually disappearing into the black night and leaving them in the truck, frightened and shaken. A moment later, like clockwork, power is restored to their vehicle, and my great-grandfather starts the truck up and then peels right out of there, making a beeline for their home, where they rush into the house, grab firearms, and spend the rest of the night locking all of their doors and windows, and got no sleep that night. When we were younger, my cousins and I would go and visit what we believe is this same bridge. I'm not sure if it was the actual bridge where this apparently took place, but it was very similar, and we would park our truck, get out, and thrill ourselves by walking around there after dark with the flashlights and embrace the creepy ambiance, armed with shotguns and rifles, of course. My great-grandparents never saw anything like that creature again, but from that night onward, my great-grandfather always kept a loaded shotgun and a pistol in his truck. Then that's it. That's everything associated with this creepy encounter, so let's talk about that here. Very richly detailed, right? This almost reads like a novel, the way this user was mentioning it. So here you have another situation, middle of nowhere, Texas. I don't even know where Christine, Texas is. Apparently it's like 70 miles outside of San Antonio. And then you have these great-grandparents that are living in that area, and then they're traveling home from some function or some family event. And then as they go over that bridge, lo and behold, the actual truck ends up dying right there. I did like the way that the user threw in that little mark that they were stating how well that the great-grandfather takes care of his truck, because that makes it unusual. It seems almost purposeful that this truck was stuck out there, that all of a sudden it went dead, and it turns out it was purposely done. But either way, though, there they were, just in the middle of the bridge, middle of the night as well, middle of nowhere, Texas, and then all of a sudden when the grandpa is out there, or the great-grandpa is out there trying to fix what he thinks is a problem with the battery, he hears something coming towards them. Pretty creepy how this creature was described. How it truly is a humanoid, how it's a mixture of a goat and a man. Goat's head, big antlers or horns on it, and then also a very skinny man's body, but the ends of both its arms and its legs had those hooves. In fact, that clip clopping sound would almost be like straight out of a movie. The idea that you could hear it, but you can't really see it too well, but you can definitely know it's there because of that sound, that infamous sound that it's making as it's walking around. And then they got that huge sense of evil from it as well. Like it was inspecting them, like it knew that they were trapped. There was not much that they could do, and it was almost loving the fear that they could feel from them, but it was at the same time not doing anything to them, because in a weird way that's even more frightful. You don't know exactly what's going to happen the next second, and then it could do something, it could not. That's more frightful than it actually doing something. So it was traversing the area of that truck several times, each time probably them wondering, is this thing going to rip open the doors? Something like that. But no, it ended up just doing nothing, at least. Although there was that weird timing associated with the great-grandmother starting to pray, and then apparently after 5 or 6 times, that's when it apparently decided it had enough, and then it went over to this other area where it originated, and then it was gone, disappeared into the night, never ever to be seen again. So what was it? Was it a Goatman? Was it the one that was there in Denton, Texas? Remember, I was just talking about that the other day with regards to another encounter as well. So is this a variation of the Goatman, or is it something else completely different? They did describe it again as being very evil, like a demonic entity of some sort. So could it be something along those lines as well? Let me know. I'd love to hear what your comments are. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.